What's going on, guys? Welcome to KP Community, episode 4.
Yeah, something like that. I don't really know.
It's episode 4. I didn't even put it on the screen this week. It's just episode 4. I know that for a fact. So jump into tonight. New format, new structure. Super pumped about this. A lot going on. Obviously on the screen, we got our scroll at the bottom now. We got our first segment tonight on Community. Guessing we're going to be explaining what's going on in Community. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So tonight on Community, first segment, each of these segments on the left side of your screen is a segment on the Community. We have tonight on Community Inside the Metrics, the People's Lab, AMA, and the Wrap. So tonight we're going to be going over Inside the Metrics to begin with Reeves. Reeves will be talking about spin efficiency. Awesome stuff. Excited to throw it over to him to check out spin efficiency. We've also got the People's Lab. We're going to be dropping a little teaser on the People's Lab tonight, talking about what it is and what we're going to do with it moving forward. We got AMA, as always. Ask us any question. We're going to be explaining those questions. Just ask me anything as usual. If you guys are watching live, appreciate you guys jumping on. You can throw your questions in the chat tonight. We'll answer them at the end. Lastly, we have the Wrap. My favorite place in the world, Chipotle. Get a nice little burrito. You're gonna see a little burrito at the end there. My art. I'm pretty excited about it. But anyways, the Wrap is just wrapping up everything, completing the session, the segment, and we'll be talking about our off-season training there. So let's jump into it. Get to the first segment tonight. We'll jump into Inside the Metrics. So really this week, talking about Inside the Metrics is going to be a segment where we're going to be talking about a lot of different values, variables, breaking them down, defining them. This week, the segment that we're jumping into, the message that we're jumping into, the metric that we're jumping into is going to be spin efficiency. So we got Reeves over at the facility, crushed it with this one. Really excited to drop this one to you. Should we throw it to him?
Yeah.
Let's throw it over to Reeves. Reeves, appreciate you joining us, dude. What do you got for us tonight?
What's going on, guys? Loving the new format over there. Today, I want to do an awesome deep dive into kind of a buzzword that's come around our baseball industry, and that's into the world of spin rate and some of the metrics that go into influencing how some of these pitches move. So I see it all the time, all over social media platforms. And right now, we're starting to see a lot of push in this baseball player development world. We're starting to track spin rate. And I think that's a step in the right direction. We're really starting to kind of do that deep dive into what actually makes pitchers successful. But there's an issue when we're just looking at a pitcher's overall spin rate. It doesn't tell the whole story, and there's a lot of other pieces to the puzzle. So that brings me over to my topic today, spin efficiency. So what exactly is spin efficiency? So according to TrackMan, one of the leaders here in our pitch tracking technologies, they define spin efficiency as the ratio of a pitcher's transverse spin or their true spin over their raw spin. So what exactly does this mean? So our transverse spin is going to be that spin that's actually aiding into the movement of this pitch, where that raw spin is just going to be those total RPMs that baseball spin on the way to the plate. So when we're talking about some of what goes into making those pitches move, there's another term and a metric that I want to go over as well. And that term is gyrospin. So what gyrospin means, it's going to be similar to that spin that's coming out of a football or similar to like a bullet spinning through the air. So that spin isn't going to aid into the lift of the ball, but rather it's going to be more spin to the side of the ball, and that ball is really just going to fall on its way to the plate. So in-house here at KP, when we're working with those guys, going through those pitch design sessions, when we're looking into that spin efficiency metric, there's different areas that we want to hit for different pitches. Not always that we want to have 100% when we're working to that gyro slider. A lot of times we actually want to be closer towards that 0%. When we're looking at things like our four-seam fastball, that's when we're starting to look towards really trying to create the most spin efficiency as possible back to that 100%. So it varies pitch to pitch, and it's always going to come back to how we're trying to boost that player's pitch arsenal when we're going through those pitch design sessions. So guys, I hope this clears up some of that noise you might hear in that world of spin rate, spin efficiency, any of those pitch design metrics that we're looking for. So in summary here, we want a pitch to have more movement. We're looking to aid that spin efficiency, kick it up a little bit closer to 100%. If we're looking for a pitch to have a little bit less movement, closer to that gyro slider range, then we're going to go back a little bit closer towards that 0% and a little bit more center on that XY chart. So guys, I'm gonna kick it back over to you at the studio. Keep crushing it.
I mean, awesome stuff from Reeves. I mean, one of the like coolest segments. I love that. He explains spin efficiency perfectly. I mean, when we start talking about one of the things he brought up that I really want to talk more on, he starts off that segment talking about the metrics that we're seeing online, right? So we see that a lot of times we have like rankings of top spin rates in an event, right? And I have this issue because I laugh. You know, we want to categorize what is good and what is bad. And oftentimes when we look at that, we look at like, what's the top 10 spin rates in this event? And we like to think that, you know, oftentimes those spin rates are helping us categorize good, you know, elite level components of an athlete, right? So we look at the big leagues and we say, oh, this guy has 2,800 spin. We're like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's off the charts. Then we look at like high school guys and we say, how do I stack up comparative to that? Or how do I stack up in my population? And guys will hang their hat on, oh, well, I was one of the top performers in spin rate in the entire event. That means something. Reality is, without context, those metrics don't mean anything. Captain Changeup over here. I know you sit at our facility a lot. Garrett throws amazing changeups at our facility, and has learned. It's funny, you know, being a strength coach.
Yeah.
Like you have this interest level, and when our ball flight tracking systems are on, like you have this idea that you're wanting to develop certain pitches or want to play around certain pitches. You find it entertaining and interesting. You learn to manipulate the pitch to create a desired output. And so I know one of those outputs is like 20 inches of horizontal break.
So my best changeup ever is 81 miles an hour, 23.4 horizontal.
Yeah. So perfect.
Sounds really good.
Great example, right? So if we look at 23 inches of horizontal break in the league, like we compared it with, oh man, you're off the charts. Like that's amazing. But reality is, I've watched you enough.
Yeah.
You've learned how to drop your arm slot and manipulate the pitch enough to create that 23 inches. So the reality is that 23 inches alone, does that mean you are good or off the chart? Well, to a degree, yeah, it's cool that you can manipulate it like that. That's awesome. But if it's not within context, it really doesn't matter. It's just creating a singular metric. So we look at something like spin rate, we realize that spin rate can be influenced by just cutting the baseball a little bit, right? Horizontal break can be influenced by just getting to the side of the pitch a little bit, right? So we start to kind of put in context, like, well, I can manipulate these things and it completely alters my perspective of that singular metric. So when we talk about spin rate, it's not about, am I in the top 10 in spin rate? It's let's normalize that. Let's say, am I in the top guys who had this spin rate with this spin efficiency? And then if you want to throw other metrics in there, even like, did I get high swing and miss on that too? Because technically we're looking at high spin rate, high spin efficiency to drive more swing and miss. So if I put those metrics together, then it actually means something. But oftentimes I hear guys go, hey, how did the event go? Oh, well, I was like one of the top 10 in spin rate for the event. So that's kind of cool. I'm like, yeah, all right, well, you know, whatever. But I kind of laugh, right? Like we put these things, and we see it in strength and conditioning too. Like we go online, right? Guys go on and they look at power lifters or you know, whatever, bodybuilders, and they're like, well, I want to be like this guy trains this way, and then they want to do that too. And it's like, well, no, like you're not valuing the specific metrics that mean the most for you actually getting to where you're going to go. It's not about like this guy's, you know, super yoked and 250 pounds. That guy's super yoked, 250 pounds, and for you as a pitcher, you know, those guys, a lot of them been training for, you know, 20 years.
Yeah, very long time.
Yeah, and in many cases they're on some sort of drug, or they're, you know, they're doing things to their body, manipulating their body because that's their sport. Like that's the thing that they do. So you want to weigh in on that on the strength side of it at all? Like, do you want to touch that? I know it's a kind of a tough topic.
Yeah, it's just thinking about training in general is like, the only reason you're training is for a desired outcome. And for pitchers, it's you train to become a better pitcher. You don't train to look better. You don't train to do anything other than get better at pitching.
Yep.
And the way you get better at pitching is by pitching more and workload and everything else from that standpoint.
It's not the thing that we want to like note here. So Reeves broke down spin efficiency, which is awesome. We talk about how to manipulate spin efficiency, but when we look at a singular metric like spin efficiency, it's not about manipulating singularly the spin efficiency. It's about creating the desired outcome on the field in performance with something and spin efficiency and something else and having these pieces put together the big picture. So it's really important for you guys as athletes. Highly recommend you guys, look, number one, learn to define it, which is what these segments are for, define the metric. But number two, learn what combines with that metric to create the big picture for yourself so that you can go out and have adequate performance. So with that being said, let's jump on to our next segment, the People's Lab. So pumped to bring this one. We've been talking about this one for long time, like 5-6 months, maybe, trying to get this one up and running. Dr. Mike Sohn from ProPlay AI is going to be joining us as our head of research for this one. Really cool opportunity for not only, obviously the content you're going to see here on Community and the betterment of this content, but just, in general, like we're going to be putting this up on Twitter, Instagram, etc., giving guys a space where they can go in and actually see or ask questions and actually see responses to their questions for real research. So let me run the teaser real quick, give you some context here. We'll talk a little bit more about it afterwards. All right, so that's the People's Lab. Questions from the people, by the people, for the people, something like that. And we're basically doing research for you guys. So you can ask us questions online. You can drop us, email. And what we're going to be doing is giving you guys space where you can ask not only us, but also Dr. Mike Sohn. Basically, through our data, you can ask what we're seeing. And inspire some research, get some feedback, some actual intelligent data, which is, Dr. Mike Sohn brings a whole nother level to this. So we're really excited about it. Also have Lynn and Richards, BDG. Lynn will be helping out a little bit as well, giving some different coaching perspectives. Sometimes it's nice to hear from Garrett and I, but bringing in somebody from the outside as well, who's also got a pretty large population of data. Really cool to combine those data sets. We're kind of research partners in that. And then Mike to oversee it and to actually deliver some evaluation of it in context as an ergonomist, big word, ergonomist, which is what Mike is by trait. So with that being said, that's the People's Lab. Look out for more on that. Next week, we'll be launching some more information on that. Social media will be the place to find that, to start asking your questions there and start to spur on your own research projects for the first time. So pretty cool for that one as well. Let's move on to our next one. Garrett, we're gonna get you talking. Sweet. All right, let's jump into AMA. Garrett, I know you got some questions tonight. I also got a question tonight. So why don't you kick it up? What is the first question that you received tonight? And I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, so the first question I got is from Michael Malzone, or Calzone.
The big Calzone.
Grande Calzone's on his glove. Calzone is on his glove. So his question is which is better, front squat or back squat? And when we think about this, we first have to look at what squatting is. And squatting, either front squat or back squat, the intent is to gain leg strength. That's it, to express leg strength. We talked about a difference between expression and building of strength exercises earlier on, I think 1 or 2. So always go check that out.
We recap that real quick. For
so
those of you who also lost episodes and have no idea what episode we're on, because that's us as well. So that's okay.
So expression of strength exercises are exercises that we are expressing how strong we are. We're combining a lot of smaller movements into one and expressing how strong we are. Building of strength exercises are smaller exercises, or the bigger exercises broken down to smaller exercises. And that's where we can spend majority of our time, because it's going to allow us to recover in time, but also have more sets, reps, tempo to actually build strength. And then we go back to the expression of exercises to express those new gained strengths. So we look at front squatting, back squatting, expression of strength. So that's the first thing. We look at why we're doing it, the intent behind why we're doing it. Leg strength. Okay, got it. Then we look at the bar placement is really going to be the main difference. It's obvious, the main difference. So front squat, because the bar's in front, the limiting factor of that lift isn't really going to be leg strength. It's going to be your upper back being able to hold extension and not fall forward. Because the second your core breaks and you go into flexion, lifts over, and there's no way you're making that lift.
That's for a front squat.
That's for a front squat because the bar's in front. The second you break that core, your core fails, done. So you're really never going to get to your like max leg strength because of that. So on the opposite end, back squat, because the bar's on your back, it's going to then allow you to lift more. So from a leg strength standpoint, back squat is better. But when we look at skill level and understanding why we're doing it and the progression into the skill of lifting, a front squat may be a little bit easier because we're able to hold. It's a very easy thing to hold here. Instead of getting a bar on your back, and there's a lot more technical cues that you have to be aware of in a back squat than a front squat. So from a technical thing, front squat might be a little bit better. And then lastly is just understanding why we do them in the first place. It's like, can the guy squat? That's the biggest question. Is the final is like, can the guy squat? If so, okay, good. Now we look at the individual themselves. If you have this type of rib cage or that type of rib cage, that might dictate which one we go to. So there's like flat rib cages, round rib cages. There's a whole different conversation, but that's going to dictate which one's going to help you better, because it's going to have a bonus effect. It's like, okay, we're going to get leg strength out of the front squat. Well, we're also going to be able to force the way you need to breathe in a certain way for that exercise. So it's basically just trying to compound as many aspects of what we need from training into one exercise, which is great. But if an athlete can't do that because they haven't progressed the way they need to into that exercise, no big deal. There's just because the squat is an expression of strength, we know there's smaller movements that athletes can do with less skill level more often, which is still going to progress them through training. And do we ever need to have to squat? No, but it's nice to, because we don't have to do as many other exercises.
So to that real quick. So I think one of the things when I look at like, how do we, I look at athletes a lot on social media. I look at athletes a lot, and just talking to athletes. And one of the things that I see, and I'm guilty of it too, right, is, we look at what feels good today. Like, what do I want to feel? I want to do more. And oftentimes that can be the worst thing, or I don't want to do anything at all. And that could also be the worst thing. So one is you're pushing yourself to fatigue. One, you're seeing no change because there's actually no stimulus change, right? We want to find that happy medium and progression, but we're talking about programming here. We're talking about the depth of programming. Like, this is a deep topic for especially a lot of guys kind of just getting into really fully grasping their training. Like, this is a deep subject. But what's important to recognize is, going to the gym and just back squatting because you feel like back squatting and loading the bar is, number one, not smart, like not intelligent. Yeah. Like, there's squatting's a skill. Like, there's a lot to it that, I know you critique me on my squat a lot. Thank you. And I'm not a good squatter, but I look at it and I laugh. I go, you know what? I'm guilty of it. I just want to load the bar some days and go do my thing. I'm not really on a program. I'm more doing my endurance stuff, which is a whole different thing and should be more focused on strength, but that's okay. We're not worried about me, right? We're worried about the athlete who's trying to create a long-term plan to create a career here. So that means we have to selectively choose what exercise progression, regression we want to be on, which means that sometimes we're going to back squat. Sometimes we might front squat. Sometimes we might, do a kettlebell lunge instead, like, because there's a reason, a place where you're at right now as an athlete where an exercise specifically is going to best fit you. So the question of like, is it better to back squat or front squat sort of kind of isn't about the exercise. No. It's just an exercise.
Yeah, it's just an exercise.
It more comes down to what's better for you. That should really be the question.
What's better for you to get better at your sport.
Exactly right.
And that will always, no matter what exercise you do, that overarching question of what will this help me on the mound is the question that will trump any type of like, I want to back squat, I want to front squat, I want to do this exercise or that exercise. If that question is, if I back squat, will I get better? If no, there's no reason to do it. Like the only reason you're training is to get better at your sport.
And I would say the same thing about the set rep scheme too. Like,
yeah, it's like
it's if you hop in the gym and like, hey, I'm gonna do 10 by 10 today.
Yeah.
Well, why? Like,
It's
why are you doing 10 by 5, 10 by 10, 10 by 3? Like, why are you doing that period? Like, is it helping you actually achieve your thing? So we got guys that, I laugh because it's like, we'll write the world's best program and like you put hours and sweat, you'll just like, just get it after. I've seen your 12,000 row, spreadsheets and databases of lifts, super intelligent progression regressions. But then we've got athletes that on Sunday or on Wednesday or on a day off, basically, right?
It's a programmed
it's a programmed off day, which is super valuable, super important.
Super important.
And we've got athletes who'll go, I felt like doing bicep curls today. I felt like squatting today. What oftentimes athletes don't understand is that just because you're doing more, because you're feeling like you're grinding, we talked about last week, because you feel like you're grinding, doesn't mean that you're actually getting better. It actually, in many cases, will mean that you're getting worse. So I laugh because it's, this is getting into the more of the programming component here, but you have front squat versus back squat. Well, before we start to really dive into that question, like it is important we answer that question. We did. But let's also reference before we ever even move into what
There's
exercise
a long
selection.
way before we even get to that question.
Yeah, let's worry about why are we doing what we're doing? How consistent can we be with it? I talked about stepping forward last week.
Yeah.
I know a lot of you guys reached out about that and talked about that. We talked about that in the facility this week with some of our guys. Look, this term step forward, I've been using it a lot with our guys, and what I mean by it is, when things become mundane and you want to go toward your feelings, don't let your feelings grab you and push you in a different direction.
Yeah.
It's step forward into the mundane, be the master of the mundane. That's one of the things you said last week too. I love that. Like step forward into managing and mastering the mundane, the things that are repetitive, understand why we're doing it, and recognize that if you just keep going down the same path, you keep working, if it's a well-written path, you trust the process, good things are going to happen. If it's a crappy path, don't keep going down the path, change that path. But oftentimes that crappy path can be, hey, I had one outing and I'm deciding to completely revamp everything, change everything, right?
Or you had one good outing and you think what you did that day,
and you're going to try to repeat that every time.
It's like, hey, like there's a grand scheme to things that
it's the same thing in the weight room. Like I felt really good, 1 month of my career, and it was, man, I back squatted all the time before that. Well, no, it's so much deeper than that. There's so much more that goes through it. So answering the question the big calzone gave us, which is front squat or back squat, it's important to recognize, it's probably more than that. It's from what it sounds like the answer. It's great.
In one situation they're good, one situation they're bad, and reference point is a huge thing.
One of my favorite things you say is it's situationally good food.
Situationally good. There
are
situationally good exercise.
Situationally good exercises depending on who you are, what your assessment looks like, how you go about it, etc. Situationally good food. Garrett gets into talking about like how like chocolate or like Skittles or whatever, if you eat them right before you lift, in some cases, not every day, but in some cases, situationally good food, and obviously in some semi-moderation, which is obviously a thing too. So but situationally good exercises, front squat, back squat, depending upon the athlete. Final answer?
Yes.
Perfect.
Both.
All right, moving into our next question. What else we got?
So the next question is from AJ Chacon, and he asks, how many days should I be working out a week? So I want to answer this in two-parter. So first, I want to talk in a grand scheme of someone's career from start of freshman year through 30 years old pro. So and then I'll go into more seasonal structure and we can talk about that. So when we think about a long-term plan, so if you first just start out lifting, the thing that's going to progress you quickly is going to be rate of exposure, being in the weight room, being exposed to lifts. So that means more frequency. That means maybe 5-6 times a week in the weight room. But because you're so new to the weight room, the loads are lighter. The exercises are easier. The fatigue that you're going to build through a single training session is going to be very low because you're learning the skill of lifting. But that means you can do it 5-6 times a week. So let's see a year from then. Now you're a little bit stronger. You're probably higher skill level. So you're doing heavier loads. You're either doing deadlifts, you're doing lunges or squatting. Now we can accumulate more fatigue in a single training session, which means it's the same amount of fatigue that we built up through the first year of training, but then we can now go, okay, we might go 4 days a week or 3 days a week. I think that transition is really hard for guys to comprehend, because they think, oh, what got me here in a year, or what got me to this point in my career is training 6 times a week, is training 5 times a week. But we have to look at what we're actually doing in the weight room is completely different, and a completely different adaptation that we're trying to get 2 years in, 3 years in, 4 years in, compared to the first time that we're in. And that's where like doing less sometimes is, once you get farther in your career, doing less is more, and you're stepping forward by technically doing nothing. And I think that's a hard thing for guys to comprehend, because they think, oh, I got to keep doing the same thing. No, we have to change through your career, because your career and your goals technically kind of change throughout the years. So we need to think about where we go from a programming standpoint.
So I think on that, like, we can talk about the offseason a little bit. We'll jump to our last question, which is really like, when we start off the offseason, I know you and I talk a lot, and this is one of the things we really focus on, which is, we might push a guy with a lot of volume and a lot of accumulation in the weight room, like early in the offseason, when our throwing volumes are lower. As we move to that higher intensity, throwing more bullpens, preparing for season, we kind of flip that back off on the weight side a little bit, and kind of move into the season quickly. I just want you to talk about tonnage. I know that's a term and a metric. Just give a brief overview on that. I don't want to get too deep on it, but it's this idea, kind of like chronic workload and throwing, right? We're building up that fitness. Explain to me kind of how we're doing that in the weight room.
Yeah. So early on in the off season, we're going to be building that tonnage, or that chronic workload. Tonnage is just basically the accumulated stress. Is a metric to help calculate or manage stress in the weight room. And so early in the off season, tonnage in the weight room is going to be super high, because we're not having so much stress on the throwing side. But as throwing increases and the intensity of throwing increases, we have to back down on that tonnage. Doesn't mean we have to do it by volume, or doesn't mean we have to do it by volume. We can do it by intensity, we can do it by volume, or we can do it by both. And that's leading into the season. That's where in season is going to change a little bit too, and understanding where we go from a standpoint of like understanding if they're a reliever or starter, and that can change things from that standpoint as well.
Excellent. So I think we'll wrap it up there on that one. Last question I got here tonight comes from a coach on a text message. Love that, by the way. I think that's an easy way to look at that from a tonnage standpoint, understanding the metric of tonnage. We can look at it objectively to see that change over time. You guys can check that out on Google. Definitely good metric to Google and check out a little bit. So last question we got for the night comes from a coach. Says, I have a guy who makes very few throws, and his sleeve says they are all high effort. So his score jumps very high really quickly. I've looked at how he's wearing the sensor, watched him play catch, and it appears to be very low effort, but the number is very high. What are your thoughts? So great question. One that we get quite often, from certain guys. So a couple key variables to note here. Body type. How tall are you? How skinny are you? Arm positioning. Are you getting to elbow extension early when you throw? Are you internally rotating quickly? Those are all things that the throwing sleeve, when we monitor workload management, that's what it's tracking. It's giving us the ability to look into and understand workload as a whole, and not count pitch counts, for example. It's looking at how your actual body's receiving load, so to speak. So starting off, first thing to understand, 45 Newton meters of torque is what that sensor has labeled as high stress throws. And so when you throw a baseball, the harder you throw it, the more torque you're going to receive. If our arm is going from if it's getting to extension too early or earlier than others, it's going to read off higher. If it's internally rotating faster, it's going to read off higher. But the one thing that I really want to note is if you are skinnier or if you are taller than your population or your height, it's going to read off more stress as well. So it takes that into effect as well in the calculation of what we're doing every day. I say all of that to simply say two things. One is that it's that sensor is tracking. Don't worry about the metric. First off, don't worry about the metric of high intensity throws. That sensor is tracking and normalizing your throws to your body. To be honest with you, things like sleeve adjustments, things like height and weight, things you can't control in some cases, right? But the other piece to that is when we start to look at daily workload values. If you hit your daily workload value that we give you, day over day, you're going to achieve a specific load that we've set out for you for that day. And you're going to progress that load over time, which is why we wear that sensor. So it's not so much about the high intensity throws or how quickly you get to that number. It's about trying to get to trying to accumulate a bunch of days of those singular numbers that we've planned appropriately. So you're properly building yourself over time. Even if that rate of load is lower or higher than the rest of the population, it changes based upon your type. We have some submarine guys, some guys that are really low. They have higher loads over the span of a season. That's definitely interesting to see that, they might carry like a 17 or 20 chronic workload. And I kind of laugh. It's like, we look at these guys and we say, they might have a higher load, but it's not for me to say that we need to build them slower. We just need to get them to where they need to be, which means that we have to plan it appropriately. So you guys just make sure to answer that question. Just make sure, don't worry about the high stress. Just make sure that, the high effort throws. We're just looking at trying to connect these pieces to our 1-day workload values. So to close it out tonight, we have the wrap, which is basically talking about off-season training for us. Yep. Saw Austin Adams Day. Some of our big league guys starting to come back. Talked to Freddie Tarnock last week. Freddie's getting back in, I think, next week as well. Yeah, exactly. So a couple guys having great seasons this year. Super excited to get our guys back. Some new faces coming in this offseason with our pro guys. A lot of college guys, high school guys also filtering in. Guys, it's going to be busy this offseason. So for the wrap, the one thing I want to point out is I want to make sure that you guys know you can go to KineticProBaseball.com. You guys can check in at the baseball page underneath training. You guys will see the sign up or book an assessment. Make sure you guys hop on, get that assessment done to get started with us. Also on the scheduling tab, if you are new or returning, regardless, get that assessment done. You can find that click here button on the assessment tab. That's also to link you to our scheduler for the assessment. Assessments are Wednesdays and Saturdays. So pumped to get you guys back. Make sure you hop on that scheduler. Spots do fill up fast in the wintertime. It's busy. Yep. We're gonna be busy as always. Super excited about it though. Like I said, a lot of new faces, a lot of great guys coming in to continue to build up that family, that community that we've been building for the last couple of years in the off seasons. We're gonna get after it, have some fun, put out some content, maybe have a couple of those guys on here as well. So pretty awesome. So anyways, guys, that's all for tonight. For questions, if you have questions, as always, hit us up on support at KineticProBaseball.com. And Garrett and I will be kicking stuff back. Reeves, Matt will also be responding to your emails there. But as always, guys, appreciate it. We'll see you next week with another episode of KP Community.
Sweet. See ya.